Today a few footnotes, but notes that I regard as important added to the sermon of last week. The title, Holding Eastern Goutha while Celebrating Heat Pads. And I wonder how many of you know what I refer to when I say Eastern Goutha. There are a few hands going up, more than I anticipated, which I am very glad about. Let me start off by sharing one of my life experiences with you. Just after I started my chaplaincy in the South African military during the Angolan War, I was asked by a commander that just returned from quite an intense operation to visit one of his troops. That was in the intensive care unit. I went there, and I was quite young then. I think I was 23 at that stage. And I went into his room, and I wasn't prepared for what I encountered there. His whole body was covered in bandages. The only thing protruding was his head. And even though his last name indicated that he was an African, his head, or what remained of it, was pink. Burned away the rest. No lips, no nose, no ears. We called him Cinder afterwards. He survived. That was his nickname, Cinder, because a white phosphorus grenade exploded right next to his head. An incendiary device that's very effective. That's still used in many war situations today, even though it is not permitted. Because white phosphorus burns until it is deprived of oxygen. So when it lands on you, it burns until it's inside your flesh and it's completely covered, and there's no oxygen anymore. It is terrible. That image haunts me, and why I mention it came back to me when I read in the media and saw some images in East Goutha, or Eastern Goutha, I don't know which adjective to use. That suburb of Damascus, close to Damascus, which is the last stronghold close to the city of rebels holding out against the Syrian government with their allies, the Russians and the Iranians. They have bombarded that for a very long time. It's been under siege since 213, with very limited, if any, supplies getting through. Medical supplies especially, and also food. And these starving people, under the latest bombardments, which has intensified in spite of the UN resolution not to do it, people are sheltering in their cellars. But to burn them out, they've started using incendiary ammunition. And when that wasn't successful enough, they started using mustard gas again. And that is more or less silent. Nobody bothers with it. Previously, the last time that we were aware that mustard gas was used by the Syrian government, at least a few missiles were fired from our arsenal as some form of a gesture. That image haunts me as I speak of happiness from the pulpit. Another image that haunts me is that of that disheveled polar bear drifting on a block of ice, waiting for it to melt, too tired and too malnourished to swim, and starving and waiting. I don't know if he's aware of it, but waiting to drown. That on the one hand. On the other hand of my existence, the joy of having in our basement, Krista and I, experimenting for the first time growing seeds with grow lights and heat pads. And we don't quite know how to do it yet, but we started probably way too early. And it's amazing to be part of and to observe that wonder of creation with just rising temperature in soil, the grow medium, and just a little bit of artificial light. To see the seeds just germinating and growing to the extent that they are up against the plastic cover on top of it already, and it's 2 months too early. Can't take it outside. But that is a wonderful problem to experience, and to be part of that process of life and creation and recreation. The problem of local wonder and happiness combined with a macro picture. How do you reconcile living in a place and experiencing things that give you joy, that is beautiful, that speaks to us of the best that life can offer, while at the same time living in an age when, through very effective and instant mass communication, you are aware of so many things, terrible things all over. There is an arsenal, a huge parade of things that are so terrible that you cannot comprehend it and you cannot imagine it. How do we live meaningfully and with happiness while living responsibly in this dichotomy and this seemingly overwhelming barrage of negative news? Like we listened to the chapter from Isaiah. That's a very striking chapter because it speaks of this feeling of impending doom, of the apocalypse approaching. So God is going to destroy everything. And if you escape this punishment, don't worry, the next one is waiting for you. There's no out. The good ones will be punished and the terrible ones will be punished even more. They'll be punished terribly. But everybody is going to be punished. There's no escape, and the earth is being destroyed by God. It's not unique to have that feeling of impending doom and apocalypse, apocalyptic angst, anxiousness when there is huge transition taking place, and especially when there is a shift in world powers taking place. It was the time of Israel, it was the same, the small nation among the shifting sands between Egypt and Assyria. Uncertainty, bringing fear into the picture. Not much different from us today when we look at our world, except we don't need God to mess up the earth or the planet. I think we're doing a pretty good job ourselves. Just through sheer numbers of people, where actions no longer can be absorbed into the ecosystem, but we are so many that we are impacting the very planet that we have to exist on and exist from and exist as part of. I've said that good research and the wisdom of several religious traditions affirm that the way to happiness is through living in community with close relationships and finding something that gives your life meaning beyond yourself. That combination, research indicates, and the wisdom of many traditions say that is bound to bring you happiness. But most of those words, I think, were spoken before the time of instant and mass communication. where we are being made aware of so many more things that I think, at least I find it incredibly difficult to balance it. And I'm working on it and trying to figure out how to go about this. Even somebody as esteemed as the 14th Dalai Lama said that even you should be fully present locally, immediately where you are in contact with other people, in the moment, fully present. He said as far back as 2009 that global priorities should, or global themes should take priority now. And he mentioned specifically the catastrophe happening in Tibet, not the political one. He was talking about the glaciers melting because he said all 4 major rivers of Asia, from the Ganges, the Indus, the Mekong, and I think the other one is the Yangtze, originate in the Tibet Plateau, being fed from those glaciers, and they are melting away. He said that should take priority. Even though as leader of Tibet he was speaking in exile. But how do we balance this global responsibility and local loyalty? How do we balance being fully present without isolating ourselves from our macro environment that will eventually catch up with us as well? If you don't want to work with responsibility, then work with fear. And no, we're all going down together. We're in this together whether we want to know it or not. How do we do it? And in the interest of time, I will do something that I do not normally do in sermons. I'll read my few words, my thoughts on this. Just so that I don't mess it up. Before I do that, the one option I think is for us to isolate ourselves, to revert back and pull back into our little bubble. The caveat, though, is that your bubble must be comfortable. You cannot pull back into your house if you don't have a house. You cannot live comfortably in your bubble if that bubble brings you misery. And in a market economy, it normally means that you can exist happily in your little bubble if you have the means to make that bubble comfortable. The other option for us is to be fully invested in everything that is going on around the world. And I think I've been there where you're in the end so struck down, so demoralized, so confused with what to do about what. Especially when you have limited means, in every sense, energy, time, financial means. That is the other option. And to try and find a way to exist meaningfully while being fully invested in the present and also fully invested in the here and now, while also being fully invested in what is going on around us in other places, and fully invested also in the future so that we do not leave a dystopian wasteland to those that will follow us. And this morning, because this is when I thought, okay, I have to put this into words now, because I'm still wrestling with it. And this is probably not the final version of it. My guidelines that I'm working on to establish it for myself, in which I'm only partially successful part of the time, is to be fully present and available for people and life in my immediate environment, while also being fully present through committed action in selected global situations, especially in those places and towards those that are forgotten, and then especially towards those where we carry collective responsibility for causing the misery and the despair that people are experiencing. The key is, for me, action. To work with people who can make your global action meaningful and effective in the local situation. And I'm concluding my meager thoughts on this. I think the key for meaningful living beyond mere existence or survival is still to derive meaning from beyond ourselves and our own interest. And to practice this in a local, like-minded community with an openness to being transformed while being grounded in love. You can bring God into these words. And that is what I think church should be about. Walk with me as we seek happiness and meaningful living, existing and flourishing locally, but also being involved meaningfully and in a life-giving way globally. Amen.